Hi, I'm Toad Cruz. I'm a serial entrepreneur and the owner of Billy's Blog. Today we have the well-known author Chuck Blakeman with us. I'm holding one of his first copies of his upcoming book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. His book is relevant to companies that want to put the industrial age behind them and welcoming the participation age. So, Chuck, could you please give me a brief introduction of yourself before we get started? I know you have clients like Apple and Microsoft and many other Fortune 500. And you have more than 20,000 followers on Twitter. So, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we've worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. We're working with a lot of small business owners on 4 continents now. We have a offering with business owners called 3 to 5 Club, which is now on in Asia, Africa, Europe, and America, where we work with business owners to help them build their business and build a business that makes money when they're not around. And my background is that I've had 8 different businesses, and 2 or 3 of them were actually successful. 2 or 3 of them were things I needed to get out of pretty quickly, and 3 or 4 of them were things that I made a nice income off. So I've been around the horn. I've been at everything from a call center, a direct mail, a printing company, fulfillment distribution center, a software development company, a design and branding marketing company. We've sort of been around the loop. I even had an architect, a landscape architecture company at one point. So I'm addicted to entrepreneurialism, and every time somebody says that I can't do something, that pretty much makes me go into that business.
That's a good point. Cool. Okay, that's good. If you have only 30 seconds, how would you describe your new book?
Great question. I think so. We got a lot of great toys out of the industrial age. The industrial age did a lot of great things for us, but it dominated the way we worked for probably a century and a half. The problem is that along with the great toys, we got a lot of human carnage out of the industrial age. It changed the way we existed as human workers, and did some things to us that they're not normal over the period of human history. The 150 years of the industrial age is an unwelcome blip and a very unattractive blip on the landscape of the world around us. So I'd say one of the things we got out of that was a generation of people who were told to shut up, sit down, live invisibly, and the whole idea of not asking why, we get into that a little bit. But the fact that Dilbert is still funny, the cartoon Dilbert is still funny, demonstrates to us what is wrong with what came out of the industrial age. All of that front office practice that treats people like children instead of adults, and has the top-down hierarchy and competing management fiefdoms, and the scarcity mindset, all of that stuff has really had a negative impact on the way we do business. Fortunately, we're getting away from that stuff. The farther we get away from the industrial age, the better off we are. We're entering a new age I call the participation age. I didn't make that up. Quite a few people are using it. And today, in the participation age, people don't want to be treated like children anymore. They don't want to be treated like employees. They want to be adults. They don't want to be locked down daily for 9 hours in an office daycare center. They're in the participation age. People are demanding to participate and share in the building of a great company. They want to participate in the creative process of building the company together, and in all the rewards that come from that. So why employees are always a bad idea was written to confront the disease and what we call the business diseases of the industrial age, and to give us a new way to go.
That's a good point. Okay, so in the book you describe the industrial age. What is the core message of your book? So when people have read the book, what do you want to leave behind and say, okay, we should do this instead of this? So what is the core of that?
The core thing is this, that your culture matters. The culture that most of us have is an inherited culture that came out of the industrial age, and it's bankrupt. It's not a good idea. And the way that we run our companies today, the business practices that we have, come from a belief system that is bankrupt. And so the core message is this: people are not stupid and lazy. Regardless of what the industrial age wanted us to believe, that the worker was stupid and lazy and had to be managed, the fact is that most people are not stupid and lazy, and they don't need to be managed. They need to be led. Give them some vision, give them some guidance, and then get out of the way. And if you do that, if you let everybody participate and share as owners in your company, they don't even have to be physical owners, but to have them have a sense of ownership, to make decisions, to create, to ask the question why. If you give them the ability to be adults, your company will last longer, it will make more money, and you'll have less turnover, and everyone will be happier. So we need to reject pretty much all of the business practices we have right now coming out of the industrial age are bad.
Okay, that's a good point. Now we're talking about culture, because I know that's a big part of your book. You also talk about you can be adult and you can work from home because you're a responsible person. And how do you cope with building a culture that is a company culture if you also work at home? Like, could you elaborate on that? I know it's a question later on, but we can discuss it right now.
Absolutely, and I think that's not easy to do. Nothing worth doing is easy to do. The way we solve that is, if possible, we want people to come in on a regular basis and collaborate with others. One of the things you find out in the research that we've done on how to build a great company, collaboration is really a necessary thing, but creativity happens alone. And what happens is someone at home gets a great idea, and then they need to come into the office and collaborate with others to give it wings, and to, when all of us are working on it together, we're much more likely to take that wonderful idea and actually flesh it out in the company. So there's a balance between working at home and collaborating with other people. If you work at distances, then the collaboration doesn't come physically, but it becomes doing things like we're doing right here, Skyping together and creating work groups where they collaborate together on a regular basis to get things done. So there's a balance between being the creative person on yourself and being the collaborative person together. And the other reason being home alone is a good idea is all the research says we're more productive that way. We're more productive and we're more creative by ourselves. The creative things and the productive things happen by ourselves, but then we need to get together and collaborate. So I'm not saying people need to scatter to the four winds and never talk again. We're made to live in community. We need community as human beings.
Exactly.
And that's a central piece of building a participation age company.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good point. It's about both creativity on your own and collaboration. So it's go hand in hand. You also talk about management, like we don't need managers. I really like that point. We use that in Billy's Billing as well. You need to take responsibilities. If people are not used to this, like they're used to be managed, don't you think there will be a big cluster of people that don't know what to do and just sitting at home, not doing anything or working with the wrong things? Or what?
Well, sure. Yeah, you think about this, Toke, we've got 150 plus years of industrial age factory system that is fading in the rearview mirror, but that's our recent history. And when you and I were born, that was already becoming something that was starting to move into our past. But we just assumed that's the way human beings have always worked because we didn't know any better. We grew up in a system that had been there for 150 years. It might as well have been there for 10,000. So we've got 150 years worth of history to fight against when we make this transition. And then every one of us personally have worked in companies that in this age, even though the industrial age is behind us, most of the companies are using industrial age front office business practices. So we have all that working against us when we say to someone, you are now an adult. They look at this and say, wait a minute, I don't even know what that means. I've got 150 years of history and people have been telling me what to do for 17 years, and now all of a sudden you want me to decide what I do for myself? It's not going to happen overnight. So we have to be patient with people. But here's the good research on this. The fact is, 20% of people, what we want to do is we want to change people from employees to stakeholders. And 20% of people are naturally stakeholders. They're naturally adults. You can't tell them what to do. They're always going to ask why. They're always going to try and figure out a better way to do it. If you ask them to do X, they're going to figure out how to do X plus 1. They're highly motivated. They could all be business owners on their own. That's 20% of the population. The research also says about 19% of the population is inherently lazy, and you can't help them. No matter what, the only way to make them work is to stand over them with a whip and do the managing thing. The other 60% is up for grabs, Toke, and here's what's happened. Over the last 150 years, that 60%, they are not natural-born leaders. They're natural-born followers. And when they accept a job, they look around and they say, okay, what game do I need to play in order to keep my paycheck? And most of the companies out there have created a system that is designed by geniuses to be run by idiots. That's the industrial age complex. And you look around and you figure out very quickly your job is to be one of the idiots. Don't ask why. Shut up. Sit down. Live invisibly. Go out quietly. I get it. That's the game I need to play. I will be stupid and lazy in order to keep my job, even though I'm naturally not. So 80% of the people are recoverable. They don't want to be stupid and lazy. 20% are already not going to put up with that nonsense. The other 60% of the people that you're going to have to take some time and make a transition with them. It takes 6 months to a year and a half to get someone to make the transition from being told what to do to living on their own and making decisions without managers. But once they get there, they'll never go back.
Okay, that's a good one. You're also talking about giving responsibility instead of giving tasks. We have talked a little bit about it. Could you elaborate on that concept?
Yeah, employees want tasks. Just tell me what to do. Tell me which nut to put this bolt on or bolt to put this nut on. And tell me how many you want each. And we give them that task. But stakeholders want ownership. And ownership comes through responsibility. So instead of saying to them, put this nut on this bolt, you say, we need to build a washing machine. Help us figure out how to do this better. Use your brain, make decisions. Here's the result I want. You tell us how you can get us that result. And you figure out how to do it better than we could because you're the one who's going to be doing this task. If you make the decisions on how to do it, you're going to own it. So the mantra here is when you give a stakeholder responsibility, it creates ownership because they get to make decisions. They're no longer an idiot in a genius's game. But when you give people tasks, they feel used. Responsibility creates ownership. Tasks simply make people feel used. They're another cog in the machine. Put this nut on this bolt. I've already figured the whole thing out. And all you have to do is repeat this over and over and over again. It's mindless. It's dehumanizing. And all you're going to do is make people feel used. There's no ownership in it.
No, that's a very, very good response to my question. I love the thing that that you don't tell people how to do it, but more the problem that you want to get solved. That's a very good point. That leads me to my next question. You talk about this adult things. People are adults; they're not children. What will the reaction be when you tell people now you are on your own? What is your experience with that? Is it I guess it's a positive thing, but yeah, please elaborate on that.
But it's a scary thing because we have 150 years plus my own 20 years of working in an industrial age environment. When you tell me I'm now an adult, that can be a scary thing. Gore, the people who make Gore-Tex, W.L. Gore Incorporated, they're one of the leaders in this participation age movement. They've been working as a participation age company for over 30 years now, over 40 years. It's a 10,000 person company, $3 billion company, and there's not a single manager in the whole place. There's a few dozen leaders, maybe even a few hundred leaders. But the only way you become a leader at W.L. Gore is because someone is already following you. Not because you have a title, and not because they're required to. Nobody at Gore works for anybody else. There is no management. That at W.L. Gore, it takes 12 months for people to realize that they are no longer going to be managed. And when people come out of an industrial age environment, you can't just go to them like you turn on a light switch and say, okay, you are now an adult. I'll see you later. It takes time, and we have a 4 or 5 step process for turning someone from an employee into a stakeholder, and how you can move from being a manager to a leader. It's all one great transition, but that's the transition that has to happen. Managers have got to stop managing people, and employees have got to stop acting like children. They need to be set free to be adults. When we do that, it sometimes takes 6 months to a year and a half to get someone to move from being an employee to a stakeholder. But once they do, again, they never go back. But it is a transition, and it is a scary thing to begin with. As long as they know you're going to be with them through the transition, you're going to work with them, people are fine with it. We've done it with a lot of companies already, and they're fine once they figure this out. What happens, Toke, is that 20% who never want to be adults, they start looking at this very quickly, and they quit. They self-select themselves out. They do not want to be exposed and actually have to be responsible for their lives. The other 80% look at it and say, wow, this is exciting. I get to be an adult. I get to make decisions. I get to be a human being at work. Count me in. And then it's a transition for what that means throughout the process. There's 2 assumptions that we work with in this whole process, Toke, that are very important. And they come out of the work done by a guy named Frederick Taylor. He wrote a paper in 1911 called Scientific Management. It forms the basis for all of our management practices today. Most people have heard of Peter Drucker. Mm-hmm. Peter Drucker is one of the biggest management consultants in history. Peter Drucker says this unknown guy named Frederick Taylor had more influence on the 20th century than Freud, Darwin, and Marx. That's a pretty big statement. How did he make this impact? Because he made 2 assumptions, and all of our assumptions about employees fall from these 2 assumptions. Assumption number 1, the average employee is so stupid that he more resembles the ox than any other type. Taylor said people are generally stupid. The second assumption he made, Toke, was that people are generally lazy, that they'll do what he called soldiering. They'll only work so hard as to not get fired. Toke, if everybody that works for you is stupid and lazy, the only solution for that is to find the rare, smart, and motivated person and have them manage the stupid and lazy ones so that they'll be productive. And thus management was born on that assumption that people are stupid and lazy. So the biggest way to make this transition is to get yourself as a leader to believe that people aren't stupid and lazy, and that they are smart and motivated, and all you have to do is unlock that and unleash them and let them go, and then watch what happens. And I can give you dozens of companies where they've done this, and they're wildly successful, much more so than the average company.
Oh, that's what you talked about. 5 steps of this transaction. Could you briefly?
Sure.
Yep.
Very briefly. Yeah. Let me run through those. It's really just a conversation that you're having with people. When the leader is having a conversation with a stakeholder, you're asking yourself this question: which conversation am I having? And it's really only 4 conversations. Conversation number 1 is, can they identify the problem? If you're having a conversation and you see they can't even identify the problem, that's level 1. That is the lowest level of employee. You first have to train them to identify the problem. Now you're having conversations and they come to you and say, hey, I identified the problem, but they have no idea how to identify the solution. That's your next level of training, is to teach them how to identify both the problem and the solution. And by the way, a manager would never do this. A manager would say, let me solve this for you. They wouldn't train them how to do it, because then the manager is no longer important. The third level is, okay, you can find the solution, or you can find the problem, and you're beginning to identify the solutions, but you're afraid to implement the solutions without coming to me and making me identify which of the 3 solutions should I actually do. So you train them to the point where they're comfortable enough that they don't have to come to you anymore. You finally have a stakeholder talk when you come to level 4. Level 4 is they can identify the problem, they can identify the solution, and they can implement the solution, and then they come to you and say, here's what I did. So you, as the leader, it's not like you're out of the loop, but you no longer have to identify the problem. You don't even have to pick the solution. They just simply come to you and say, here's what happened, here's how I solved it. And then if you don't like that solution, you can keep training them. But now you are a leader and they're a stakeholder. Until you get to that level, you're a manager and they're an employee, and you'll never get off that treadmill, either one of you.
That sounds rewarding. So that means you can fire a lot of people if you use this tactic.
Yeah. What will happen is the
At least the managers.
The employees, the 19% who don't want to work in the workforce will fire themselves. What I found in our companies that we're dealing with, you can replace one manager with 10 leaders, or you can replace 10 managers with one leader. When people don't need to be managed anymore, all they need is vision and guidance and training and support and connectivity. It doesn't take nearly as many people to do that as it does for people who lord over people and say, you have to get this done. So managers are like a 1 to 7 model. Leaders can be 1 to 70. 1 to 50, 1 to 7. You need very few leaders in a participation age company in order to get the work done.
Okay, that sounds great. Now we're talking about rewarding people. How you talk about don't give bonuses, give rewards instead. Could you explain that concept? I like it. It's cool.
Yeah, one of the major, one of the fundamental mindset shifts that has to happen to move from the industrial age typical business practice to a participation age company is this one thing. You've got to move from a time-based company to a results-based culture. The time-based culture, again, comes right out of the industrial age. You have to show up at 9, you leave at 5, and I tell you exactly what to do all day long, what time recess is, the whole thing. Everything is planned out for you. And you get rewarded based on how much time you spent in the seat. You give me 8 hours, and I'll give you $10. That was the industrial age trade-off. The problem with that is that the people who didn't grow up in the industrial age are no longer going to put up with that trade-off. My son worked for a company where they paid him a lot of money, but wouldn't let him ride his bicycle at work for an hour and a half or 2 hours during the middle of the day instead of taking lunch. So he quit and started his own company. And they were paying him a lot of money and told him he would eventually own that company someday. But see, they were an industrial age mindset. You have to be in the chair 9 hours a day, and if you do, I will pay you. Here's the mantra of the participation age. You give, in the industrial age it was, you give me your time, and I will give you some money. The participation age it is, you give your people time. You give them time, and they will make you money. And so rewards are no longer time-based, they're result-based. And here's how it works out. Very simply, in terms of time, if we decide together, I want X result. You need to make 10 of these a day or 20 of those a week or whatever it is. Here's the result I want. The workforce says, I will get you that result. In a participation age company, then you say that I don't care where you are and I don't care when you are. Your results are no longer based on, or your rewards are no longer based on how much time you spend in the chair. It's based on whether you get me the result or not. Get me that result and leave it free. I don't care. Be gone for 2 hours during the day. If you get me that result, I don't care where you are and I don't care when you are. It's a results-based environment. And even manufacturing companies can do this. And W.L. Gore is one of those. Semco is another company with 3,000 stakeholders, not a single manager in the place. And it's a manufacturing company. They make washing machines. And they don't dictate when people show up at work. They just say, make X number of washing machines. If you do that, go home.
That's perfect. Could you be more specific about what rewards you should give instead of just money rewards?
So if you look at the research says rewards have meaning to people at 3 levels. The least rewarding thing you can do for people is give them money. Now, if you ask them, they'll always say, give me more money. The research shows that the least rewarding thing you can do is give them money. And what that means is that if they're getting paid something commensurate with what everybody else in their industry is getting paid, if I'm on the phones and I'm getting paid generally what everyone else is getting paid, that is no longer a motivation for me to look for a job. I'm sort of in the ballgame. Then everything else that floats to the top is not about money. The second most rewarding thing you can do for people is give them stuff. So a Starbucks card or an iPad or an iPod or a bicycle or that kind of stuff. That's the second most reward. That's much more rewarding than money. I'm going to give you a bicycle or an iPod.
I just gave one of my colleagues a bicycle.
Every time he gets on that bicycle, he will remember where the bicycle came
Exactly.
from. That's a very rewarding thing. But if you gave him the money to buy the bicycle, he'd forget very quickly where that money came
Mm.
The most rewarding thing you can do is give people an experience. And when you gave that guy a bicycle, you gave him stuff and an experience. Because now every time he gets on that bicycle, he has an experience based on that stuff. So an iPod can be the same thing, that stuff and experience. Even a Starbucks card can be, I go and I have an experience because I like Starbucks or whatever it is. But sending people away on vacation. When we had one woman, one of the people who works with us, our chief results officer, laid out my most recent book. She had to learn how to do it. And as a result, we put $1,500 into an account for her to buy plane tickets.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
And so she had 3 or 4 vacations, basically to go back home to go other places almost for free. And every time she did that, she remembered where that came from. We bought her those experiences. We're now thinking of putting funds, instead of giving people raises this year, we might put a fund together for each of us to have vacations. And you can't get this money unless you go off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be examples of rewarding people based on results rather than based on time. When people do something good, catch them doing something good and reward them for that. Another way to do it very quickly is replace annual raises, because annual raises are time-based.
Mm.
We've given people, in some cases, we've given them 4 or 5 raises 5 months in a row. And then we don't give them a raise for 9 months. Then we give them another raise. Then we don't give them a raise for a year. Then we give them another raise. But it's based on them contributing and doing things that expand their contribution to the business around us. We catch them doing something right, and we give them a raise or we give them a reward based on the results. Instead of waiting 11 months or 12 months and saying, well, you sat in the chair for another 12 months, there's another 3.5% raise. Very demotivating.
Yeah, definitely. So that's the good thing. If you perform and you get results, you get paid in gifts and experiences.
And more money.
And more money, yeah. What happens if people are not doing this by the book? What kind of penalties, do you have?
Every risk has its reward. Every reward has its risk. So when you move away from an employee-based culture where you tell people to do and they simply sit in their chair 8 hours, you can move into a results-based culture. Now I actually expect you to get me a result rather than sit in the chair. And we all know that if we've all worked in environments where there were 10 people doing the same job, and if you were one of the productive ones, you knew that 80% of the work was being done by 20% of the people, and 2 or 3 of them were goofing off all the time and sucking up to the manager, and the rest of them were sort of just making things happen, just sort of making along. But if you get into a results-based environment, those people who aren't doing the work will no longer be around. The leadership will fire them, or better yet, in the participation age company, you give that responsibility to the group. And those 10 people now vote each month on who gets to stay on the island, and they vote together on who's being productive and who isn't. And that problem solves itself because those people are not being productive. It's self-exposing. You are not making the type of production that you yourself agreed you could do. You're gone.
Okay. I don't really have any more questions because we talked about the management. That's a very big part of your book, I think, and the rewards as well, and the change from industrial age to participation age. I really like that connection. Do you have anything extra to add?
Yeah, let me stimulate your thinking real quickly on what a participation age company looks like. These are real companies. This is not imaginary. What if you were a company that had no titles, no departments, no corporate ladder? There's never going to be a promotion. Nobody ever gets promoted. They just make more money and get more responsibility as they increase their capabilities. No office hours, unlimited vacation time. Nobody has, you have 2 weeks. No, it's unlimited. Profit sharing for everybody. Not a single employee and not a single manager. Even companies without HR departments and no written policies. I can show you companies like this that have 5 employees, 50 employees, 500. They're actually not employees, they're stakeholders. 3,000 stakeholders, 10,000 stakeholders. I can show you companies that already are like this in every industry, in every at every size, and every age of company. This is not optional. Going into the future, we are going to see a tidal wave of companies becoming participation age companies at every level, at every age. And what's going to happen as a result, Coke, is that those people who want to be adults, the most productive people, are going to find these companies. They're going to leave the industrial age companies behind. So I think that's a very important thing for people to understand is this is not optional. This is not a fringe idea. This is not a wacko thing that's out there. This is where business is moving, and it's moving there very quickly. And then in the next 5 to 10 years, this will just be a big duh. Of course people want to own. Of course people want to do profit sharing. Of course they don't need managers. This is just the way business is going. We're finally getting away from the industrial age, which was supposed to be over 30 or 40 years ago.
That makes good sense. So I guess because everybody will now be adults and treated like adults, you will need new types of managers because now they are leaders. So I guess, how do you educate the leaders beside reading your book? So how do you manage that?
This is the toughest piece of this, Coke. And I say this in my book. Managers are the bane of a participation age company. They are the critical thing standing in the way of any company wanting to get out of the industrial age. If you want to get to where people own their responsibilities, you're going to have a company that does not have managers. They have to be eliminated. It's not optional. And that's very difficult for people hearing this who say, wait a minute, I'm the director of so-and-so, I'm the manager. Well, you know what? You don't have to be the manager. Maybe you can be the leader. Let's transition you from manager to leader. Managers create fiefdoms. Managers control stuff. Managers keep the status quo. Managers collect people and things and assets so that they can make themselves valuable. Leaders do the exact opposite. They use their power and authority to make other people successful, and then they get out of their way. So here's a real quick mindset for anybody out there who's listening who is a manager who's thinking, oh crap, I'm going to lose my job. You can be an incredibly valuable leader. And here's how you do it. Managers solve. Leaders train. Which one are you doing? When people come to you to bring you problems, do you solve those problems for them, or do you train them how to solve the problems themselves? If you're a manager, you want to solve because that means you create a job security for yourself. As long as these people never figure out how to solve this themselves, or I never give them the authority to, then I'm always valuable. But a leader says, I don't want you coming into my office doing this. I'm going to train you how to do it. And I'm going to give you 2 or 3 more times to figure this out, and then I don't want you to come to me anymore. And frankly, if over a period of time you can't learn how to solve, then we're going to have to work on that. You might not be there.
Yeah.
Leaders train, managers solve. Managers are always in the way. They insert themselves into the process and make themselves indispensable. Leaders train and they get out of the way. They make themselves invisible all the time. I no longer need you other than to be visiting guides, getting the day-to-day. You're no longer there. So managers don't need to fear this unless they are scrutinized. If they don't want to actually be productive, then the place where people hide more in a company than anywhere else is in management. Very hard to hide in production. And it's very hard to hide in leadership because people won't follow you. It's incredibly easy to hide in management. And so there are people out there who are scared to death of the industrial participation rate because they've been going to work for years, spending 8 hours a day sitting in a chair, passing paper back and forth in a Walnut office and pretending to do something when in fact they had almost no value. Leaders are going to look at this and going to embrace it and say, finally, I get compensated for being a leader and for having people who really want to follow me. And it's a beautiful thing for them. So stop solving and train. That's the mindset of the leader is that you can't come to me anymore. I'm going to train you how to do this. I'm going to make you valuable. I no longer have to be the person doing this for you.
Do you think this is a typical American problem, or is it a European problem, or is it a world problem?
It's a world problem because Europe exported the industrial age factory system to the United States. The United States perfected the factory system, exported that to China and Africa. And so this is a very Western mindset. But we've exported it all over the world, that people are stupid and lazy and have to be managed. That's just the assumption that we created when we took the factory system and built it in those two places. So this is a world problem. But the good news is, again, it's a very short-lived thing. We've only been doing this for 150 or so years. People ask me all the time, prove to me that people aren't stupid and lazy. Because look, you go into a factory of 1,000 people, and there's people standing right over them having to do things, and when those people walk away, they don't work. They are stupid and lazy. And I say, no, the system made them stupid and lazy. And here's how we know that. Think about what was normal before the industrial age. Before the industrial age, somehow the overwhelming majority of people worked for themselves. They had their own farms, they had their nice little shops, they sold things on the side of the road. The overwhelming majority of people were self-employed, and somehow they weren't stupid and lazy for thousands of years. They figured it out. But as soon as they cross the threshold of an industrial age company, they somehow lose their brain and their ability to make good decisions. So the managers have to see it this way as well. These people are not stupid and lazy, and I'm not stupid and lazy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Chuck, I think we got pretty much covered the big parts of your book. So if you don't have anything extra to add, or then
Now let me just add this one thing. One of the motivational difference between an employee and a stakeholder. I don't think we covered that yet. That's pretty critical. Employees are motivated by making money. I need to sit in this chair for 8 hours and then get paid. A stakeholder is motivated by making meaning. They want to go to work and know that what they did mattered. And they got out at the end of the day and said, I made a difference. And because of that, I got paid. And that's a critical difference. And most people, the research says that most people want to make meaning. Very few people actually just want to make money. So that's another reason why this is going to change the way people do business, because the overwhelming majority do not want to make money. They want to make meaning, and they'll make money as a result of it. I think that's an important thing.